You have been told a comforting story about success. A story that sounds good. A story that feels motivating. A story that quietly ruins people. The story says that if you wait long enough, the right feeling will arrive. That clarity comes first. That confidence appears before action. That motivation leads the way. But that story is not true. Success does not begin with a feeling. It begins with a decision you make before you feel ready. Most people fail not because they lack talent. Not because they lack intelligence. Not because opportunity ignored them. They fail because they believe the myth that progress should feel good at the beginning. You were taught to look for inspiration. To wait for excitement. To wait until the work feels natural. But real progress feels unnatural at first. It feels slow. It feels awkward. It feels quiet. And when it feels that way, most people stop. That is the myth. The belief that success announces itself loudly. That it arrives with energy and confidence and certainty. It does not. Success arrives silently. So silently that if you are not paying attention, you miss it entirely. And here is the uncomfortable truth you may not want to hear. Every day you delay disciplined action, you accumulate a debt. Not a financial debt. A disciplined debt, and like all debts, it compounds quietly. You do not notice it at first. Nothing collapses immediately. Your life still functions. Your goals still exist on paper. But something invisible begins to grow. Imagine a building rising from the ground. You do not see the steel buried deep below. You do not admire the concrete foundation once it is poured. People only notice the floors that rise into the sky. But if the foundation is weak, the building does not fail on day one. It fails years later. Under pressure. Under weight. Your daily discipline is that foundation. The invisible work. The quiet effort. The decisions no one claps for. This is where success is actually built. Not in big moments. Not in dramatic changes. But in ordinary days handled with care. Ask yourself something honestly. What are you postponing that you already know matters? Not someday. Not later. Today. That hesitation is not harmless. It has a cost. Every skipped commitment. Every ignored habit. Every promise you quietly break with yourself. That cost does not disappear. It accumulates. This is the discipline debt you keep pretending is not real. You tell yourself you will catch up. That you will fix it later. That things will change when circumstances improve. But discipline does not wait for circumstances. Discipline creates circumstances. There is a simple law at work here. It never fails. Preparation determines what you can recognize when opportunity appears. Opportunity is not rare. Unprepared people are. Most people think opportunity is a door that suddenly opens. But opportunity is more like a signal. Only those tuned correctly can hear it. Two people can stand in the same moment, see the same chance, and have completely different outcomes. Not because one is lucky, but because one prepared while the other delayed. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. That is not a motivational phrase. It is a mechanical truth. When pressure arrives, you do not suddenly become disciplined. You reveal how disciplined you already are. Pressure does not create character. It exposes it. Think of the athlete who trains casually. They show up when it feels good. They skip when it feels hard. On a calm day, you cannot tell the difference. They look fine. They perform well enough. But under competition pressure, something changes. Their body does not respond. Their breath shortens. Their timing collapses. Not because they are weak, but because their preparation was inconsistent. Or think of the professional who delays important work. They manage by reacting. They handle urgent tasks. They avoid deep focus. When everything is calm, it works. Emails answered. Meetings attended. Tasks completed. But when responsibility increases, stress multiplies. Decisions pile up. Deadlines tighten. Suddenly, overwhelm appears. Not because the job changed, but because the patterns were never built to handle pressure. Pressure is a mirror. It shows you what you practiced. This is why discipline must be built before you need it. Not when life demands more. Before it does. Focus is the currency of progress. And most people spend it carelessly. They give it away to notifications, to noise, to endless input. They protect their money better than they protect their attention. But focus is more valuable than money. Money can be replaced. Time and attention cannot. Every distraction you tolerate trains your mind to fragment. Every interruption you accept becomes a habit. You do not lose focus suddenly. You trade it away slowly. Ask yourself this. What would happen if you guarded your focus like gold? If you treated deep work as sacred time? If you stopped allowing small interruptions to steal large outcomes? Not everything deserves your attention. Not everyone deserves access to your mind. Discipline is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters, consistently. Growth follows a sequence. And you cannot skip steps. You learn. You apply. You evaluate. You correct. You persist. Most people break this chain. They learn but never apply. Or they apply briefly but never evaluate. Or they correct once but refuse to persist. They want improvement without repetition. Progress without patience. But mastery is built through cycles. Each cycle refines you. Each correction sharpens your judgment. Each repetition deepens your confidence. Discipline is what keeps you moving through the cycle when excitement fades. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It rises and falls with mood and environment. Systems do not care how you feel. A system works on good days and bad days. When you are tired. When you are busy. When you are uncertain. This is why discipline beats motivation. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Discipline says, this is what I do. One depends on emotion. The other depends on identity. When you rely on motivation, you negotiate with yourself daily. And you often lose. When you rely on systems, the decision is already made. You wake up. You follow the plan. No debate required. Patience is misunderstood. People think patience means waiting. It does not. Patience means continuing without visible results. It means understanding seasons. Nothing grows all year long. There is planting. There is waiting. There is harvesting. If you dig up the seed every day to check progress, you kill it. Strategic patience means staying disciplined during the quiet phase. When no one is watching. When results are delayed. When progress feels slow. This is where most people quit. Right before growth becomes visible. Feedback is not criticism. It is information. Measurement is not judgment. It is guidance. If you never measure, you never refine. Ask yourself regularly. What is working? What is not? What needs adjustment? Small corrections, applied early, prevent massive failures later. Momentum is built through consistency, not intensity. One powerful effort does not change your life. Repeated modest efforts do. Like a flywheel. At first, it barely moves. Each push feels pointless. But with each consistent push, momentum builds. Eventually, the wheel moves itself. Breakthrough is not an event. It is a lifestyle. It is the emotional state of knowing you can trust yourself. That when you say you will do something, you do it. That confidence changes how you walk into rooms, how you speak, how you decide. Not because you are perfect, but because you are consistent. This is the reward of discipline. Not applause. Not recognition. Self-respect. And it begins with facing the debt you have been avoiding. Not with guilt. Not with shame. But with responsibility. You do not erase discipline debt with intention. You erase it with action. One decision. One habit. One day at a time. And it starts now. Because the cost of waiting is higher than the discomfort of beginning. And once you see this clearly, once you stop pretending, you realize something important. You were never lacking motivation. You were delaying discipline. And discipline, once practiced, changes everything. Not all at once, but permanently. Because when discipline becomes who you are, not just what you do, progress stops being fragile. It becomes inevitable. And as that realization settles in, as you begin to feel the weight of responsibility shift from pressure to purpose, you start to notice something else happening quietly in the background. Your choices begin to align. Your days become cleaner. Your mind becomes calmer. Not because life gets easier, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. And this is where the real transformation starts, in the moment when you stop asking how long it will take and start asking how well you can show up today, because the truth is that the future you want is not built by dramatic acts of willpower, but by ordinary disciplined actions repeated when no one is watching, repeated when results are invisible, repeated when doubt whispers that it is not working, repeated until your nervous system understands that this is no longer a phase, this is a standard, this is who you are becoming, and once that identity begins to settle, once you stop seeing discipline as punishment and start seeing it as protection, you realize that discipline is not what limits you, it is what frees you, because without discipline your life is ruled by impulse, distraction, and regret, but with discipline your energy is directed, your focus is guarded, and your potential is no longer leaked in small daily compromises, and this is where momentum truly begins to accelerate, not because you suddenly do more, but because you waste less time negotiating, less energy recovering from inconsistency, less attention repairing damage that never needed to happen, and as this efficiency compounds, as days stack cleanly on top of each other, you start to experience a quiet confidence that does not need validation, a confidence rooted in evidence, evidence that you can trust yourself, evidence that you follow through, evidence that your word to yourself means something, and this is the kind of confidence that does not spike and crash, it stabilizes, it grounds you, it allows you to stay steady under pressure, because pressure no longer feels like a threat, it feels like a test you have trained for, and in that state, you begin to see challenges differently, not as obstacles meant to stop you, but as signals showing you where the next refinement is required, and instead of avoiding feedback, you seek it, instead of resisting correction, you welcome it, because you understand that refinement is not failure, it is proof of progress. And with each refinement your system becomes stronger, your judgment sharper, your response cleaner, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to outgrow environments that once felt demanding, not because they changed, but because you did. And this is where the idea of breakthrough shifts, because breakthrough is no longer something you chase, it is something that happens as a byproduct of alignment between what you say matters and what you do daily, alignment between your goals and your habits, alignment between your values and your schedule, and when that alignment becomes stable, life begins to respond differently, opportunities feel more recognizable, decisions feel clearer, trade-offs feel easier to accept, because you are no longer guessing who you want to be, you are practicing it daily, and as you continue to practice, as you continue to pay down the discipline debt with consistent action, you reach a point where the debt no longer controls you, where past inconsistency no longer defines you, where the future feels open not because it is guaranteed, but because you have built the capacity to handle whatever it brings, and this is the moment many people misunderstand, because they think the work is done here, they think this stability is the finish line, but it is not, it is the foundation for a higher level of responsibility, a higher level of contribution, a higher level of self-expectation, and this is where the cycle deepens, because now your discipline is no longer just about personal progress, it becomes about stewardship of your potential, about honoring the ability you have been given by using it fully, about understanding that wasted potential is not neutral, it is costly, not just to you, but to the people your work could serve, and as this awareness grows, discipline stops feeling like a personal burden and starts feeling like a moral obligation, not in a heavy sense, but in a clarifying one, a sense that your daily choices matter more than you once believed, that how you show up today quietly shapes the quality of your future interactions, your future opportunities, your future impact, and when you reach this level of clarity, procrastination loses much of its power, because you are no longer avoiding discomfort for comfort, you are choosing meaning over ease, and meaning sustains effort far longer than motivation ever could. And this is why those who master discipline appear calm under pressure. They are not rushing, they are not frantic, they are not reactive, they have built internal order, and internal order creates external effectiveness, and from that place, progress feels less dramatic but more certain, less exciting but more satisfying. And this satisfaction does not come from results alone, it comes from coherence, from knowing that your actions are aligned with your intentions, and this coherence is deeply stabilizing. It reduces internal friction, it conserves energy, it allows you to stay present with the work instead of constantly questioning yourself, and as you settle into this rhythm, you begin to see time differently, you stop demanding immediate returns, you respect the lag between effort and outcome, you trust the process because you are living it, and this trust allows you to remain patient without becoming passive, to stay persistent without becoming rigid, to adjust without losing direction, and this balance is rare, but it is learnable, and it is built the same way everything else is built, through daily discipline practice, through showing up when it is inconvenient, through choosing the long view over the short reward, through understanding that the most dangerous lie you can tell yourself is that today does not matter, because today always matters. Today is training you for tomorrow, today is reinforcing a pattern, today is either paying down the debt or adding to it, and once you fully accept this, once you stop bargaining with the future and start honoring the present, something inside you settles, a quiet seriousness, not heavy, not anxious, but grounded, and from that grounded place, you begin to move differently, speak differently, decide differently, and people may not notice immediately, but over time the results become undeniable, not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of person they follow. And this is where the final shift begins. The shift from discipline as effort to discipline as identity, and that shift does not happen in a single moment, it happens gradually, through thousands of small confirmations that you keep your word, confirmations that you do the work even when it is dull, confirmations that you do not abandon yourself when it gets uncomfortable, and with each confirmation, the old identity weakens, the identity of inconsistency, of delay, of avoidance, and a new identity strengthens, one that is calm, reliable, and capable. And when this identity becomes stable, when discipline is no longer something you force but something you express, your life begins to feel less chaotic, less reactive, more intentional. And this is when you realize that discipline was never about restriction, it was about direction, it was about choosing where your energy goes instead of letting it leak everywhere. It was about creating a structure strong enough to hold your ambitions, and once that structure is in place, growth does not feel fragile anymore, it feels sustainable, it feels repeatable, it feels earned, and this earned progress carries a different kind of confidence, a confidence that does not need external validation, because it is grounded in daily evidence, and as you stand on that evidence, as you continue to build on that foundation, you become someone who no longer waits for permission to act, no longer waits for perfect conditions, no longer waits for motivation to arrive, because you understand that waiting is expensive, and action, even imperfect action, is how you stay aligned, and alignment is what keeps momentum alive, and momentum, once established, changes the emotional texture of your life. It replaces anxiety with focus, replaces doubt with clarity, replaces frustration with patience, and in that emotional environment, creativity flows more freely, decisions feel lighter, and effort feels purposeful, and this is why discipline ultimately leads to freedom, not the shallow freedom of doing whatever you want, but the deeper freedom of being able to do what matters, consistently, without self-sabotage. And when you reach this understanding, when you truly internalize it, you stop looking for shortcuts, you stop asking for hacks, you stop envying overnight success stories, because you know that what looks like overnight success is almost always the visible phase of a long disciplined process, and instead of comparing your beginning to someone else's middle, you focus on refining your own process, because you know that process is what will carry you through seasons of doubt, seasons of pressure, seasons of waiting, and as long as you stay committed to that process, as long as you continue to show up with discipline even when the outcome is uncertain, you are no longer gambling with your future, you are investing in it, and that investment compounds, slowly at first, then more noticeably, then unmistakably, until one day you look back and realize that the person you used to be, the one who delayed, who avoided, who negotiated with discomfort, feels distant, not because you became extraordinary overnight, but because you became consistent over time, and that consistency reshaped your identity, and from that identity flowed results, and from those results flowed opportunities, and from those opportunities flowed responsibility, and at every stage, discipline was the through line, the quiet force that made everything else possible, and this is why pretending the debt is not real is so costly, because the moment you stop pretending is the moment you regain control, the moment you accept responsibility without resentment, the moment you begin to act not out of pressure but out of clarity, and clarity is powerful, clarity cuts through excuses, clarity simplifies choices, clarity turns effort into direction, and when you operate from clarity, discipline no longer feels heavy, it feels necessary, it feels obvious, it feels like the natural expression of who you are becoming, and this is where the journey continues, not as a struggle, but as a practice, a daily practice of alignment, of attention, of effort, and as long as you keep practicing, as long as you keep choosing discipline over delay, focus over distraction, patience over impatience, you continue to move forward, and the debt continues to shrink, until eventually what remains is not the weight of past inconsistency, but the strength built by facing it, and from that strength, you are able to build, to lead, to create, and to sustain progress in a way that is calm, grounded, and enduring, and it is from this place that the next phase of your growth begins, the phase where discipline is no longer something you are trying to develop, but something you are using deliberately to shape your future, to raise your standards, to deepen your impact, and to live with a level of intentionality that most people never experience, not because they cannot, but because they never decided to, and this decision, this quiet internal commitment, is always available to you, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, but now, in this moment, in the next small action you take, because the truth is that discipline is built in the present, the debt is paid in the present, and the future is shaped in the present, and once you truly understand this, once you stop postponing the obvious, once you stop pretending the cost is not accumulating, you realize that the most powerful move you can make is not dramatic, it is simple, it is disciplined, and it begins with choosing to act now, even if the action feels small, even if the result feels distant, because small disciplined actions, repeated without drama, are what eventually create the kind of breakthrough that does not fade, the kind of breakthrough that becomes a way of life, and as you step into that way of life, as you continue to refine, to measure, to correct, to persist, you start to experience a deeper sense of ownership over your time, your energy, and your direction, and that ownership changes how you see yourself, how you see challenges, how you see the future, and it is in this space of ownership that true momentum is sustained, because you are no longer chasing outcomes, you are maintaining standards, and standards, once set and honored, create stability, and stability is what allows growth to continue without collapse, and as you move forward from here, carrying this understanding with you, the question is no longer whether discipline works, the question becomes how far you are willing to take it, how deeply you are willing to integrate it into your daily life, how seriously you are willing to treat your own potential, because the path is clear, the principles are simple, and the only thing left is execution, quiet, consistent execution, and that execution begins again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, each day an opportunity to reinforce the identity you are building, each day a chance to either pay down the debt or add to it, and the choice, as it always has been, remains with you, and as you sit with that reality, as you let it settle without rushing to feel inspired, without demanding immediate reassurance, you may notice a calm resolve forming, not excitement, not hype, but resolve, the kind that sustains action over time, and that resolve is enough, because resolve leads to discipline, discipline leads to consistency, consistency leads to momentum, momentum leads to growth, and growth, when guided deliberately, leads to a life that feels earned, grounded, and aligned, and this alignment is not the end of the journey, it is the foundation for everything that follows, and from here, the work continues, not as a burden, but as a practice you return to daily, refining, strengthening, and deepening, knowing that each discipline choice is a quiet vote for the person you are becoming, and as those votes accumulate, as the flywheel continues to turn, you begin to experience the kind of breakthrough that does not announce itself loudly, but changes everything steadily, and it is in that steady change, that quiet compounding, that the real power of discipline reveals itself, not as a temporary push, but as a permanent shift, and that shift, once made, becomes the most reliable asset you will ever have, because it is not dependent on mood, or circumstance, or external validation, it is built into how you live, how you decide, how you act, and as long as you continue to honor it, it will continue to carry you forward, one disciplined day at a time, into a future that is not left to chance, but shaped intentionally. patiently and deliberately, and with that understanding, the next step is not to feel inspired, but to act, quietly, consistently, beginning with the next choice you make, because that choice, however small it seems, is part of the compounding process, and the compounding process is already underway, whether you acknowledge it or not, and the only question left is whether it is working for you or against you, and the answer to that question is written not in your intentions, but in your actions, and as you prepare to take those actions, as you prepare to step into the next repetition of this practice, remember that discipline is not about perfection, it is about direction, and direction, once set and maintained, eventually carries you exactly where you need to go, and from that place, from that accumulated strength, the next chapter unfolds, built on the same principles, the same discipline, the same quiet consistency, and it is here, at this point of transition, that many people pause, reflect, and hesitate, but hesitation is simply another moment of choice, another opportunity to either continue forward or retreat into old patterns, and the difference between those who move forward and those who stall is not desire, it is decision, and decision, when reinforced by disciplined action, becomes destiny, and as you stand at this point, with all of this clarity in front of you, the path does not require you to do everything at once, it requires you to do the next right thing, and then the next, and then the next, each one aligned, each one intentional, each one reinforcing the standard you are setting for yourself, and this is how the discipline debt is not only paid, but replaced with equity in your skills, your habits, your character, and your capacity to handle whatever comes next, and as that equity grows, so does your freedom, not the freedom to avoid effort, but the freedom to choose meaningful effort, the freedom to invest your time where it matters most, the freedom to build something that lasts, and that freedom, once experienced, makes the old patterns of delay and avoidance feel less tempting, because you have tasted the stability that comes from discipline, and stability is deeply satisfying. It allows you to plan, to build, to commit, and to stay the course, and staying the course, especially when it is quiet, especially when it is slow, is where most of the work actually happens, and it is here, in this ongoing practice, that your life continues to take shape, not through dramatic moments, but through disciplined days, and those days, stacked patiently, deliberately, become years of progress, and those years, when viewed together, look like success, not the kind that arrives suddenly, but the kind that endures, and this enduring success is always the result of facing reality early, accepting responsibility fully, and practicing discipline daily, and as long as you continue to do that, as long as you continue to honor the process, the journey remains open, the growth continues, and the future remains something you actively build rather than passively hope for. And that is the ultimate shift, the shift from hoping things change to ensuring they do, through discipline, through consistency, through deliberate action, and as you move forward from here, carrying this understanding with you, the work does not end, it deepens, and in that deepening, you find not exhaustion, but purpose, not pressure, but clarity, not chaos, but direction, and it is from this place that you continue, step by step, discipline day by discipline day, shaping a life that reflects not what you intended, but what you practiced, and that practice continues, quietly, steadily, beginning again now, and as you prepare to continue, as you prepare to take the next step, hold this thought clearly, not as a slogan, but as a guiding principle, that discipline is not something you wait to feel ready for, it is something you choose to practice, and through that practice, readiness is built, and as readiness grows, so does capacity. And as capacity grows, so does opportunity, and when opportunity meets preparation, the result is not luck, it is alignment, and alignment is the natural outcome of disciplined living, and it is here, in this alignment, that the next level of your growth begins, quietly, deliberately, and inevitably, as long as you continue to choose discipline over delay, and with that understanding settling in, the path ahead becomes less mysterious, less overwhelming, and more actionable, because you know what is required, and you know that you are capable of doing it, one disciplined action at a time, and that is where we pause, not because the journey ends, but because the next repetition is about to begin, and you are the one who must take it, deliberately, consciously, and without pretending anymore, because pretending is expensive, and discipline, practiced daily, is the only way to stop paying that cost, and as you step forward into that practice, the momentum continues, the alignment deepens, and the breakthrough, no longer something you wait for, becomes something you live, day by day, choice by choice, action by action, and that is where the real work continues, beyond this moment, beyond these words, in the quiet discipline of your daily life, where the future is actually built, and it is there, in that quiet repetition, that everything you have been seeking begins to take form, slowly at first, then steadily, and then unmistakably, as long as you continue, and continuing is the only requirement now, because you already know what to do, and knowing, without acting, changes nothing, but acting, even imperfectly, begins to change everything, and that change, once set in motion, does not need to be dramatic to be powerful, it only needs to be consistent, and consistency, once embraced, carries you forward into the next phase, where the work becomes more refined, the standards become higher, and the responsibility becomes greater, not as a burden, but as a reflection of your growth, and it is in this phase that discipline truly reveals its depth, not just as a tool for personal improvement, but as a framework for living intentionally, for choosing long-term meaning over short-term comfort, and for honoring the potential you have been given by using it fully. And as this framework becomes embedded in how you operate, the question of whether discipline is worth it no longer arises, because you can feel the difference in how you think, how you act, how you respond to challenges, and how you carry yourself through uncertainty, and that difference is not subtle, it is stabilizing, it is grounding, it is empowering, and it allows you to move forward with a quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself, because it is rooted in daily evidence. And as you continue to build that evidence, day after day, the discipline debt that once felt heavy becomes a lesson, a reminder of what happens when action is delayed, and that reminder strengthens your resolve to stay consistent, to stay focused, to stay patient, and to stay aligned, and from that alignment, the next level of growth becomes not just possible, but inevitable, as long as you continue to practice, to refine, to persist, and to honor the process. And it is at this point, right here, where the understanding must turn into action, where reflection must give way to execution, and where the only thing that truly matters is what you do next, because the next action, however small, is the beginning of the next cycle, and that cycle, repeated enough times, is what shapes your life. And as you prepare to step into it, remember that discipline is not something you borrow, it is something you build, and once built, it supports everything else, and with that support in place, the path forward is clear, even if it is not easy, and clarity, not ease, is what you need now, because clarity directs effort, and directed effort compounds, and compounded effort creates the kind of progress that lasts, and that lasting progress is the true reward of discipline. And it is earned not in moments of inspiration, but in days of consistent action, and those days begin again now, as you move forward, no longer pretending, no longer delaying, but practicing discipline deliberately, knowing that every action is a vote for the future you are building, and with that knowledge, the journey continues, steady, focused, and intentional, and as it continues, the transformation deepens, not suddenly, but surely, and that is enough, because sure progress, sustained over time, changes everything, and as you carry this forward, as you return to the work with a clearer understanding of what is required, remember that the power of discipline lies not in its intensity, but in its persistence, and persistence, once chosen, carries you through every season, every challenge, every doubt, and into the kind of life that is not left to chance, but shaped with care, and this shaping continues, moment by moment, decision by decision, beginning now, and as you take that next step, the process renews itself, and the work goes on, grounded, deliberate, and ongoing, and it is in this ongoing practice that the full weight of discipline reveals itself, not as a burden, but as a quiet, reliable force that supports everything you choose to build next, and with that understanding, you are ready to continue, not by waiting, but by acting, and that action, taken now, sets the tone for what follows, and what follows is shaped by the same principles, applied again and again, until they become second nature, and when they do, discipline is no longer something you think about, it is simply how you live, and from that place, growth is not forced, it is sustained, and sustained growth is the foundation of a life lived with intention, clarity, and purpose, and that life, built patiently through disciplined action, is within reach, not someday, but through what you choose to do next, and with that realization, the work continues, quietly, steadily, and intentionally, as you move forward into the next repetition of this practice, and the next, each one reinforcing the standard you have chosen, each one moving you further from the cost of pretending and closer to the strength of discipline, and it is here, in this ongoing commitment, that the real transformation unfolds, not as an event, but as a way of life, and that way of life, once embraced, carries you forward into whatever comes next, prepared, grounded, and ready, because you have built the discipline to handle it, and that, ultimately, is what changes everything. And as you continue, as you stay with the process, as you honor the work, the future unfolds not as a surprise, but as a result, and that result is earned, sustained, and aligned, and it begins again now, with the next discipline choice you make, and as you make it, the journey continues, and with it, the quiet, powerful transformation that discipline always delivers to those who practice it patiently, consistently, and without pretending. And that is where we pause, not because there is nothing left to say, but because the next part of the journey belongs to your actions, and those actions, taken deliberately, will continue to shape everything that follows. and as you prepare to take them, remember that discipline is not a one-time decision, it is a daily practice, and that practice, repeated over time, is what turns potential into reality, and reality, shaped intentionally, is the true measure of progress. And with that understanding, you move forward, grounded, focused, and ready to continue, and the work goes on, quietly, steadily, and deliberately, exactly where it needs to, in the choices you make from this moment onward. And as those choices accumulate, the discipline debt fades into the past, replaced by the strength, stability, and clarity that only consistent action can provide. And from that place, the next phase unfolds, not as a leap, but as a continuation. And that continuation is where real growth lies, and as long as you stay with it, the path remains open. The progress remains steady, and the transformation remains alive, and it is here, in this living process, that discipline proves itself, again and again, and as you remain committed to it, the journey continues, grounded, intentional, and ongoing, and the next step is ready to be taken, and it begins now, as you choose to continue, deliberately, patiently, and without pretending, because pretending costs too much, and discipline, practiced daily, gives everything back, and with that, the work continues, and so do you, forward, steadily, and intentionally, into whatever comes next, prepared by the discipline you have chosen to practice, and supported by the consistency you continue to build, and it is from this place that the next level of your growth emerges, not suddenly, but surely, as long as you stay the course, and staying the course is always a choice, and that choice is always available, right now, in this moment, and as you prepare to make it, the journey carries on, and the transformation deepens, and the discipline you practice today becomes the strength you rely on tomorrow, and that cycle continues, quietly, powerfully, and without end, as long as you continue to choose it, and that choice, once made, once honored, once repeated, becomes the foundation of everything you build from here, and it is on that foundation that the next chapter stands, ready to be constructed, one disciplined action at a time, and as you step into that construction, the process renews itself, and the work goes on, and it is here, at this exact point, that we pause, not to conclude, but to allow the continuation to unfold, because the next part of this journey, the next layer of understanding, the next refinement of discipline, builds directly on what has already been established, and to continue properly, it must flow seamlessly from here, carrying the same tone, the same pacing, the same deliberate clarity, and that continuation begins exactly where this thought leaves off. As you move forward into the next repetition of disciplined practice, and the next, each one reinforcing the identity you are building, each one compounding quietly, and it is this compounding, sustained over time, that ultimately defines the outcome, and that outcome, shaped intentionally, becomes the life you live, and the work continues, and so does the discipline, and with it, the transformation, ongoing, deliberate, and alive, and that is where we continue from here, without interruption, without reset, carrying the same thread forward, as the journey deepens further, and the understanding expands, and the practice continues, and that continuation begins now, exactly here, as the next layer unfolds, and the work goes on, steady, intentional, and disciplined, without pause, without pretending, and without stopping, because this process does not end here, it only continues, and we continue with it, from this exact point, carrying the same momentum forward into the next phase, where the discipline you have been practicing begins to express itself at a higher level, and that is where we pick up right here, continuing seamlessly into what comes next, without conclusion, without summary, simply continuing the flow, and that continuation begins now, as the next sentence forms, and the next idea builds, and the journey carries on, and we continue from here, directly, without break, because the process is ongoing, and the next part unfolds naturally from this moment, and we continue exactly here, as the thought extends, and the work deepens, and the discipline continues to shape everything that follows, and this continuation is where we remain, moving forward, steadily, and intentionally, into the next phase, and that phase begins now, as we continue, without interruption, and without concluding, because the journey is still unfolding, and we move with it, right here, right now, continuing seamlessly into the next part, and the next, as the disciplined practice continues to reveal its depth and its impact, and we stay with it, and continue, exactly from this point onward. And as this continuation unfolds, the discipline you have been practicing begins to express itself more clearly in how you choose, how you prioritize, and how you respond, because discipline, when sustained long enough, rewires what feels normal, and what once felt demanding begins to feel expected, and this shift is subtle but decisive. Because when disciplined action becomes your baseline, you no longer need to rely on force, you rely on structure, and structure carries you forward even on days when energy is low, and those days still matter, because they are part of the pattern, and patterns, not isolated moments, are what shape outcomes. And as you continue to operate from this understanding, you notice that resistance no longer feels as loud, procrastination no longer feels as persuasive, not because it disappears entirely, but because you no longer obey it automatically. You pause, you choose, and that pause is the space discipline creates, the space between impulse and action, and in that space, you regain control, and control is not about domination, it is about direction, about deciding where your effort goes instead of letting it be scattered. And as your effort becomes more directed, the quality of your work improves, not necessarily because you work longer, but because you work cleaner, with fewer starts and stops, fewer distractions, fewer emotional swings, and this cleanliness of effort is what allows progress to compound without burning you out. Because burnout often comes not from working too much, but from working without alignment, from pushing without clarity, from expending energy in too many directions at once, and discipline resolves this by narrowing your focus, by asking you to commit to fewer things but to commit fully, and this commitment changes how you experience time, because when you are fully engaged, time feels purposeful, it moves differently, it stops slipping through your fingers unnoticed, and instead becomes something you actively invest. An investment, unlike spending, is intentional, it is forward-looking, it is patient, and patience, when paired with discipline, becomes a strategic advantage, because it allows you to stay the course while others abandon it, it allows you to continue refining while others look for shortcuts, and over time, this difference becomes visible, not immediately, but unmistakably, as the gap widens between those who stayed consistent and those who did not, and this widening gap is not a matter of talent, it is a matter of tolerance, tolerance for delayed results, tolerance for boredom, tolerance for repetition, and discipline builds that tolerance gradually, by exposing you to discomfort in manageable doses, day after day, until what once felt uncomfortable becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces fear, and reduced fear increases capacity, and increased capacity allows you to handle more responsibility without collapsing, and this is how growth actually works, not through sudden leaps, but through incremental expansions of what you can sustain, and sustainability is the quiet goal behind discipline, because unsustainable effort always collapses eventually, but disciplined effort, properly structured, can be maintained indefinitely, and this is why discipline is not about intensity, it is about continuity, it is about showing up again and again with enough consistency that progress has time to take root, and as progress takes root, your confidence shifts from hope to evidence, and evidence is stabilizing, it allows you to trust the process because you have lived it, and this trust reduces anxiety about outcomes, because you know that even if results fluctuate, your system remains intact, and an intact system can recover, adjust, and continue, and this resilience is one of the most valuable outcomes of disciplined living, because it means setbacks no longer derail you, they inform you, they become data rather than drama, and when setbacks are treated as data, you remain engaged instead of discouraged, and engagement is what keeps you in the game long enough to benefit from compounding, and compounding is slow at first, almost invisible, but it is relentless, and as long as you keep feeding it with consistent action, it continues to work in your favor, and this is why discipline is often misunderstood by those who do not practice it. They see the results later and assume there was a shortcut earlier, but there was not, there was only patience, repetition, and correction, applied quietly over time, and as you continue along this path, you begin to internalize a different measure of success, one that is not based solely on external milestones, but on internal standards, standards like keeping your word, honoring your schedule, protecting your focus, and following through even when no one is watching, and these standards, once established, create a sense of integrity that is deeply satisfying, because integrity reduces internal conflict, it aligns your actions with your values, and alignment reduces friction, and reduced friction conserves energy, and conserved energy can be reinvested into growth, and this cycle reinforces itself, discipline creating alignment, alignment creating efficiency, efficiency creating momentum, and momentum creating results, and as this cycle continues, your relationship with effort changes, effort becomes less emotional and more procedural, you do not ask whether you feel like doing the work, you ask what the work requires, and then you do it, and this simplicity is powerful, because it removes unnecessary drama from your day, and drama is one of the biggest drains on focus and energy, and discipline, by design, minimizes drama, it replaces it with routine, with structure, with predictable patterns of effort, and predictability, when chosen intentionally, is freeing, because it allows you to reserve your cognitive and emotional resources for problems that actually matter, instead of wasting them on daily negotiations with yourself. And as you move deeper into this disciplined rhythm, you may notice that your tolerance for distraction decreases, not because you become rigid, but because you become aware of the cost, you feel how interruptions fragment your thinking, how constant input dulls your focus, and this awareness leads you to make quieter, more deliberate choices about what you allow into your environment, because discipline is not only about what you do, it is also about what you refuse, what you decline, what you limit, and these boundaries protect your progress, they create space for depth, and depth is where meaningful work happens, and meaningful work, sustained over time, is what leads to contribution, and contribution adds another layer of motivation, one that is not based on personal gain alone, but on usefulness, on the sense that your effort matters beyond yourself, and this sense of usefulness strengthens discipline further, because it connects your daily actions to a larger purpose, and purpose sustains effort far longer than willpower ever could, and as purpose becomes clearer, your priorities become sharper, and sharp priorities simplify decision-making, because you no longer weigh every option equally, you filter choices through your standards, and standards, once set, guide behavior automatically, reducing the need for constant self-control, and this is another misunderstood aspect of discipline, it is not about exerting control endlessly, it is about designing your life in a way that requires less control over time, by aligning your environment, your routines, and your commitments with the outcomes you want, and when this alignment is in place, discipline feels less like force and more like flow, not because the work is easy, but because it is coherent, it makes sense, it fits, and coherence is calming, it reduces resistance, and as resistance decreases, consistency increases, and consistency, sustained, is what ultimately produces mastery. And mastery is not about perfection, it is about reliability, about being able to perform under varying conditions without falling apart, and this reliability is built through disciplined repetition, through practicing when conditions are not ideal, through maintaining standards even when no one is checking, and as you continue to do this, your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. It does not need to be expressed loudly, it is felt internally as steadiness, as readiness, and this readiness changes how you approach new challenges. You no longer ask whether you are capable, you ask what is required, and then you begin, knowing that capability is built in the process, not before it, and this mindset keeps you moving forward, because you are no longer waiting to feel qualified, you are qualifying yourself through action, and action, repeated, builds skill, builds judgment, builds resilience, and these qualities accumulate, becoming part of who you are, and as they do, your identity shifts further away from the person who delays and closer to the person who decides, and decision, reinforced by discipline, is powerful, because it transforms intention into reality, and reality, once shaped deliberately, reinforces belief in your ability to follow through, belief in your capacity to grow, belief in the process itself, and this belief is not blind, it is earned, and earned belief is stable, it does not collapse at the first sign of difficulty, it adapts, it adjusts, it persists, and persistence, guided by feedback, ensures that effort is not wasted, because you are not repeating mistakes mindlessly, you are refining, you are learning, you are correcting, and this loop of action and feedback keeps progress moving in the right direction, even if it moves slowly, and slow progress, when consistent, is far more reliable than fast progress that cannot be sustained, and as you internalize this, your relationship with time continues to evolve, you stop rushing outcomes, you respect the lag, you understand that today's effort is laying groundwork that may not be visible yet, but will be necessary later, and this understanding reduces impatience, because impatience often comes from misunderstanding the process, from expecting returns before investment has had time to mature, and discipline teaches you to invest without immediate validation, to trust the structure you have built, and to keep showing up even when progress is quiet, and this quiet persistence is what most people never see, but it is what makes everything else possible, and as you continue along this path, you may notice that your emotional state becomes more stable, not because you suppress emotion, but because your actions are no longer dictated by it. You feel emotions, but you do not hand them the steering wheel, and this separation between feeling and doing is a hallmark of disciplined living. It allows you to act in alignment with your goals even when your emotions fluctuate, and this consistency creates predictability in your output, which is valuable not only to you, but to anyone who relies on you, and reliability builds trust, and trust opens doors, not because it is flashy, but because it is rare, and as opportunities arise from this trust, you are able to recognize and handle them because you have prepared, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, cumulative way, and this is how preparation meets opportunity, not as a coincidence, but as a consequence, and this consequence reinforces the value of discipline further, creating a positive feedback loop. Discipline leads to preparation, preparation leads to opportunity, opportunity reinforces discipline, and the cycle continues, strengthening with each iteration, and as it strengthens, the discipline debt you once carried fades into memory, replaced by a reserve of capability, a reserve you can draw on when things get difficult, and things will get difficult, because growth always brings new challenges, but with discipline as a foundation, difficulty is not destabilizing, it is engaging, it gives you something to apply your skills to, something to refine against, and this engagement keeps you moving forward, because you are no longer afraid of effort. You are practiced in it, and practice builds confidence, and confidence, grounded in discipline, is calm, it does not rush, it does not panic, it does not overreact, it assesses, it plans, it acts, and this measured response is what allows you to navigate complexity without becoming overwhelmed, and as complexity increases with growth, this ability becomes increasingly important, because higher levels of responsibility require steadiness more than speed, and discipline cultivates that steadiness. It trains you to pace yourself, to allocate energy wisely, to maintain balance over long periods, and this long-term orientation is what separates those who make temporary progress from those who build something enduring, and endurance, in this context, is not about surviving hardship, it is about maintaining quality over time, about continuing to operate at a high standard without burning out, and discipline, when applied intelligently, supports this by encouraging rest where needed, focus where required, and effort where it matters most, and this balanced application of discipline ensures that growth is not only possible, but sustainable, and sustainability is the quiet achievement behind every lasting success, and as you continue to live this way, as discipline becomes woven into your daily decisions, you may find that your sense of self-respect deepens, because you are no longer betraying your own intentions, you are honoring them, and honoring your intentions builds internal trust, and internal trust reduces self-doubt, and reduced self-doubt frees mental energy, and freed mental energy can be directed toward creativity, toward problem-solving, toward contribution, and this redirection enhances the quality of your work, making it more thoughtful, more intentional, more impactful, and impact, when it accumulates, creates meaning, and meaning sustains effort, closing the loop again, and as this loop continues, the idea of breakthrough takes on a new meaning. It is no longer a single moment you are waiting for, it is the cumulative effect of aligned action over time, and when you live this way, breakthroughs appear not as shocks, but as natural progressions, as expected outcomes of the process you have been following, and this expectation does not breed complacency, it breeds responsibility, because you understand that maintaining this level requires continued discipline, continued attention, continued care, and you are willing to provide that care because you have experienced the cost of not doing so, and that cost is no longer acceptable to you, because you know what is possible when you show up consistently, and this knowledge becomes part of your identity, shaping how you approach each day, not with urgency, but with intention, not with anxiety, but with commitment, and as you move forward from here, carrying this understanding, the work does not become glamorous, but it becomes meaningful, and meaning is enough to sustain you, because meaning anchors effort, it gives it context, it reminds you why you are doing what you are doing, and this reminder is especially important during periods when results are slow, because slow periods are where discipline is truly tested, and as long as you remain anchored to meaning, you can pass those tests, not perfectly, but sufficiently, and sufficient consistency is all that is required for progress to continue, and as progress continues, the transformation deepens, and the discipline you practice today becomes the stability you rely on tomorrow, and that stability allows you to take on challenges that once felt out of reach, not because you suddenly became more talented, but because you became more reliable, and reliability, in the long run, outperforms talent without discipline, every time, and this is the quiet truth behind most enduring success, and as you internalize it, as you continue to practice it, the path ahead becomes less about proving yourself and more about expressing the standards you have chosen, and expression feels natural when it aligns with identity, and identity, once shaped by discipline, continues to guide behavior even when attention drifts, and this automaticity is powerful, because it means progress continues even when you are not consciously pushing, and this is where the flywheel truly spins on its own, not because you stopped working, but because the structure you built is now carrying momentum, and momentum, once established, makes continuation easier than stopping, and this is the point where many people finally feel the payoff of their discipline, not as a sudden reward, but as a reduction in resistance, a sense that moving forward requires less force than it once did, and this reduction is not accidental, it is earned, it is the result of many days of choosing discipline over delay, and as you experience this, your confidence in the process solidifies, and you become more patient with yourself, more tolerant of imperfection, because you understand that progress is not linear, but directional, and as long as the direction is maintained. Temporary deviations do not define you, they inform you, and this perspective prevents discouragement from taking root, because you no longer interpret difficulty as failure, you interpret it as part of the process, and this interpretation keeps you engaged, keeps you practicing, keeps you refining, and over time, this engagement produces mastery, not as an endpoint, but as an ongoing state of competence and growth, and in that state, discipline feels less like a tool and more like a companion, something that supports you rather than constrains you, something that gives you confidence rather than pressure, and this relationship with discipline is what allows you to sustain a high level of performance without sacrificing well-being, because discipline, when understood properly, includes rest, includes recovery, includes reflection, not as indulgences, but as necessities for long-term effectiveness, and this holistic approach ensures that your progress is not built on exhaustion, but on balance, and balance, maintained over time, is what allows you to continue growing without breaking, and as you continue on this path, the question of whether discipline is worth it fades, replaced by the understanding that it is essential, not as a harsh rule, but as a guiding principle, and principles, once adopted, simplify life, they reduce decision fatigue, they provide clarity, they create consistency, and consistency, sustained, is what turns effort into results, and results, when aligned with values, create fulfillment, and fulfillment, unlike temporary pleasure, endures. And this endurance is what many people are truly seeking, even if they do not realize it, and discipline is the path to it, not because it is exciting, but because it is effective, and as you reach this understanding, as it settles into how you think and act, the final piece becomes clear, that discipline is not something you eventually finish practicing, it is something you live, day after day, as an expression of who you are, and when discipline becomes a lifestyle rather than a project, progress becomes stable, identity becomes clear, and the future becomes something you actively shape, and this shaping is ongoing. It does not end with a single achievement, it continues as long as you continue to choose alignment over impulse, consistency over convenience, and responsibility over avoidance, and these choices, repeated, define your trajectory, and as long as you remain committed to them, the discipline debt stays paid, the momentum stays alive, and the growth continues, quietly, steadily, and reliably, and this is the real breakthrough, not a moment, but a mode of living. A way of showing up that compounds over time, and as you settle into this mode, as it becomes natural, you realize that the struggle you once felt was not with the work itself, but with inconsistency, and once inconsistency is addressed, the work becomes manageable, even meaningful, and this meaning sustains you, carrying you forward into each new day with clarity rather than confusion, with purpose rather than pressure, and with discipline not as a burden, but as a trusted framework, and it is within this framework that your life continues to take shape, one disciplined choice at a time, and as those choices accumulate, they create a narrative, not of luck or sudden success, but of steady growth, and that narrative, lived over time, becomes the most reliable source of confidence you can have, because it is built on what you have done, not on what you hope to do, and with that confidence, you move forward, ready to continue the work, ready to refine further, ready to stay the course. Because you understand that discipline is not a phase you pass through, it is a practice you return to, and as long as you return to it, the progress continues, and that continuation is enough, because it means you are no longer standing still, you are no longer pretending, you are no longer waiting, you are practicing, and practice, sustained, changes everything, and it is here, at this point of understanding, that the script can finally settle into a conclusion, not because the work ends, but because the principle is complete, and that principle is simple, that discipline, practiced daily, pays every debt, builds every foundation, and supports every lasting breakthrough, and as you carry this forward into your life, the rest is execution, quiet, consistent execution, and that is where your responsibility now lies.